On the other side, you could see the emotion from the families of some of those children who were killed inside of Robb Elementary, reacting their obvious disappointment in the outcome of tonight.
You see Adrian Gonzales there embracing Nico LaHood. This is day 11 of that trial, and incidentally, in case you were wondering, the jury deliberated for 7 hours, 6 minutes. We were told about 25 minutes ago that a verdict was in, and then we're told that Adrian Gonzales, the delay, as Myra mentioned, was waiting for Gonzales to get back to the courtroom. She mentioned the 29 counts. That is for the 19 children who were killed at Robb and 10 children who survived back in May of 2022. So that's how you get to the 29 counts. But again, just to recap, if you're just now joining us right now, the verdict is in, and it is not guilty.
So we have been watching this trial, covering it for the last couple of weeks as it has been happening in Corpus Christi. Again, the acquittal tonight of Adrian Gonzales. This is the first trial we have seen in connection to the Robb Elementary School shooting. He will go home a free man tonight after this case has wrapped up in Corpus Christi. We are going to continue our coverage as there is certainly much more to discuss, much more reaction to get to the jury's decision tonight. We will do that over on our streaming platform.
Yeah, we have Daniela Ibarra there in Corpus Christi. We have our Avery Everett in Uvalde tonight. And as Myra mentioned, we're going to go on to the free KSAT Plus streaming app to continue our coverage here. We'll get you back to your primetime programming. But one more time to recap, the verdict is in, not guilty, from Corpus Christi on the 29 counts there for Adrian Gonzales.
Uvalde CISD police officer Adrian Gonzales, a jury just moments ago reading that verdict aloud, not guilty. So Adrian Gonzales has been acquitted tonight of the 29 counts he faced in connection to the response to the 2022 Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde.
This was a very highly charged, very emotional case that played out over nearly a dozen days and, of course, was moved out of Uvalde to Corpus Christi, to Nueces County. That is where we find our Daniela Ibarra, who's been there literally all day since early this morning. And I know you're just kind of coming to terms with what you've just experienced here. So what can you tell us, Daniela, about this verdict and the reaction now?
Yeah, so before the verdict was even read, we saw the family members of several of the Robb Elementary shooting victims in the courtroom, some of them getting emotional before the jury had even walked in, before Adrian Gonzales had walked in. Once they read that not guilty verdict, as soon as we saw the families, we saw they were holding hands, wiping away tears, obviously very emotional for them. The jury did deliberate for more than 7 hours, 7 hours and 6 minutes to be exact. And right now where we're standing is a media area. You see all these tripods right here? This is where we're expecting to hear from some of the family members as soon as they make their way out of that courtroom. We don't know when that is going to happen, but I will tell you, while deliberations were going on, I was talking with several of the family members, one of them being Jesse Rizzo and Manuel Rizzo, who are the uncles of Jackie Cáceres, one of the 19 children killed at Robb Elementary on May 24th, 2022. And this was a verdict that they did not want. They wanted that guilty verdict. They want that accountability, or they wanted that accountability, I should say. But they say they were prepared for this. You know, when we were talking, we were about 2-3 hours into the deliberation when we did an interview with them, and they said that they appreciated that the jury had asked them questions while they were deliberating. The jury had asked for a list of witnesses as well as a whiteboard. They asked for a list of evidence, and they also asked for a monitor. And the fact that it took so long, they said that they valued that the jury knew the gravity of what they were charged with taking on, which was finding whether or not Adrian Gonzales was going to be convicted or exonerated like he is tonight.
And you touched on how it took a little over 7 hours to get to this, and we should remind our viewers a couple of things that you mentioned in our 6 o'clock show. One, the judge was going to allow the jury to go up until 10 o'clock this evening for people who thought they might stop earlier than that. And to be clear, this had to be a unanimous verdict. All the jurors had to agree, right?
Right, and so we at 6 o'clock, we told you there was a third question. We never learned what that third question was. We knew that the attorneys and the judge in this case wanted clarification on that. But the fact that it took this long, that means some of the families were speculating that there were a couple of people who might have needed to be swayed one way or the other. And of course, as we know tonight, all 12 jurors found Adrian Gonzales not guilty on these 29 counts of child endangerment.
Daniela, you've been following this case for years now, especially after Gonzales was indicted on these charges. And this is a case that could have and perhaps still will, even though we have an acquittal here, have far-reaching effects for law enforcement. This is the first case that we have seen of an officer be tried after the Robb Elementary School shooting. We know that the former police chief is also facing charges as well. I know it's too early to say what the impact tonight might be on future cases, whether it's related to Robb or others that we unfortunately expect to see around the country. But can you just talk about what you have learned about just the gravity of a case like this, how it has been so involved in the years since all of this happened, and kind of what led us to getting to this point tonight?
Right. Well, I think one big thing to note is obviously we are in Corpus Christi, which is hundreds of miles away from Uvalde. The reason this trial got moved here in the first place is because Adrian Gonzales and his attorneys did not believe he would get a fair trial in Uvalde. I want to bring up something that came up in closing arguments this morning. Obviously, the state and the defense were convincing jurors whether or not, the state obviously wanted them to find Adrian Gonzales guilty, and the defense wanted them to clear him of these charges. And I want to read you some quotes. So Bill Turner is a special prosecutor on this case, and this morning when he was talking with the jurors during closing arguments, he said, when one of the members of your government violates the law, you decide whether or not that's acceptable, because make no mistake, you will set the bar of law enforcement. As for the defense, Jason Goss, he said, quote, you convict him, what does it tell police officers? It's going to tell them that I'm not getting in that crap. I'm not getting in that chair. If I see somebody running towards a school, I'm not going after them. So that's something that they were emphasizing, even closing statements, that this verdict, whichever way it went, would have weight.
And it was interesting that, of course, our Erica Hernandez has been a big part of our coverage, along with you, Daniela,
right,
that we heard so much from the prosecution in this case. There were timelines, there were, graphics kind of showing the layout of Robb, where Gonzalez's patrol vehicle was in relation to the shooter and the entry point at which that person went into the school. And it seemed like the defense's turn, if you will, was much shorter.
They called two witnesses. The prosecution called 36.
Right. Yeah, so those 36 witnesses included some people who were at Robb Elementary. We heard from some teachers. One teacher who says that she saw the gunman right before he entered the school. We heard from some teachers who were shot and injured and are still recovering from their injuries, I should note. We also heard from Texas Rangers who, Myra, as you described that map, it took them over a year to create. It was a pretty detailed map, a 3D map, and I believe it had some of the communications from that day underneath. That way it kind of painted a broader picture. And we also heard from some of the family members of the children who were injured that day, or the families who lost children that day. So they heard a lot from the state. This case went on for 2 weeks, and like you mentioned, 36 witnesses from the state, 2 witnesses from the prosecution, which that happened yesterday. That was a employee from the funeral home that is across the street from Robb Elementary, as well as a law enforcement expert.
So much emotion in every stage of what has happened since May 24th of 2022. We saw that emotion in the courtroom with the reading of this verdict, of course, among the families, Daniela, that you were expecting to talk to here anytime, which we, of course, will bring to our viewers who are with us, but also emotion from Adrian Gonzales himself. Daniela, we want to thank you in Corpus Christi. We're going to touch base with you as soon as the families are able to join you. But for now, we're going to wrap things up there in Corpus. We're going to take a quick break. And then we will head to
Uvalde
momentarily.
All right, we are back here with our breaking news coverage as we continue here with a verdict from Corpus Christi in the Adrian Gonzales case that came down about 15, 20 minutes ago. And here's how it played out.
Please rise. All right, your cause number 25 FC 0001U, the state of Texas versus Adrian Gonzales. In each of the 29 counts, we, the jury, find the defendant, Adrian Gonzales, not guilty. You see it? All right, members of the jury, I want to thank each and every one of you for your close attention and
All right, that moment the verdict was read happening less than 20 minutes ago, now in Corpus Christi, where that trial took place. Meantime, we have our own team member, Avery Everett. She is in Uvalde tonight, has been there for hours ahead of this verdict. Avery, you set out before we knew exactly what the jury would decide tonight. I know you were talking to people before the verdict was read. What is the feel for how folks there in Uvalde have been following this case? Have they kind of give us what you've learned being there on the ground today?
Well, let me first tell you what the last 15 to 20 minutes have looked like. I spent that time with a woman that we met here at the town square in Uvalde, watching that verdict together, and she was in tears. I met her earlier today, like you said, when we first arrived into town, and we were driving a car that says KSAT 12 on it, and she came right up to us and she said, "Is the verdict in?" And I think a lot of other people that we've spoken to out here were wondering that same question, is the verdict in? And so at 5 o'clock when we got out here, we didn't have an answer for her, but she walked us through the memorial and she helps upkeep it. And it just goes to show the heart that's still out here. But obviously this conversation is one that's just so difficult to still have nearly 4 years later. When she was in tears watching the verdict, she just said she was devastated for the families of the victim of the shooting. And she cried even harder seeing the crowd, saying each person in the crowd by name in that video, talking about their children and the memorials that they've built here and the friendships that they've built over so many years of her living here. Well, like you said, Myra, we've been here today talking to people about how Uvalde and this community is doing almost 4 years later. And part of the process, is just that this trial is a part of the process, but they say it's a tragic one. It's opening unhealed wounds. And even today when we were just standing out here by the memorial, she was in tears, just telling me the stories of how certain flowers were laid last Monday for a birthday, or how flowers were laid earlier this morning. I asked her, what is the feeling across town? Have people been talking about the trial? She says everyone that she interacts with has been talking about the trial, and she says she's been trying to watch as much of it as she can, but she said hearing some of the stories, seeing some of the photos, she's had to turn the trial off because of just how real it is in this community. She talked about how it's hard to get that conversation across to some of her community members, and it's because this is just still so fresh. So on the Night Beat tonight, you'll hear more from our conversation. We spent a couple of hours with her as she cleaned up this memorial, but Myra and Ernie, that's really what we're hearing out here right now.
All right, Avery, thank you so much. There in Uvalde, we're going to hear more from Avery, like she said, coming up tonight on the Night Beat at 10 o'clock. We understand there are some of the families who have now gathered in court.
Back to Nueces County, and this is a live picture right now of some of the family members that are speaking.
Can you talk about...
Perdón. Le fallaron a los niños otra vez. Sí, que sí.
Can you talk about just your emotions right now? Just tell us how you're feeling.
I'm angry, but I gotta keep composed for my daughter. It's been an emotional roller coaster since day one. I'm pissed, but again, we had to prepare for the worst. We had a little hope, but it wasn't enough.
What do you think will happen with the Arredondo trial?
Honestly, the same thing.
Are you gonna come back?
Of course I am.
It gives you a sense of the coverage there. You see, and I recognize immediately, I think John Quinones was there, CNN was there, we know Court TV was there. This had national, as you said earlier, this will have national implications moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that family member there saying that they were angry, but they had to prepare for what he called the worst, which in their eyes was this outcome that we saw tonight, the acquittal of Adrian Gonzales. And again, a lot of people who may have been watching this over the last several weeks as we've covered this, those are the people at the heart of all of this, the family. Yes, we had an officer, former officer, who is on trial, but it's the families that, lost so much that day, the town of Uvalde that lost so much that day. And a lot of people that we were making calls this afternoon to folks in Uvalde ahead of the verdict, trying to just figure out, is this something people are paying attention to? Is this something people are talking about? And somebody I spoke with and have off and on in the years since the shooting said that every new stage of this, the current one being this first trial, is like just having a scab ripped off, a wound reopened. And, I just can't imagine what this, this new implication means for those folks.
It really is hard. We're going to listen to some more family members here. Our Daniela Ibarra is standing by with some of the family members. We heard some audible crying, obviously, and some of them are speaking again to the media in Corpus Christi.
Respect the jury's decision, but it just, what messages is sent out there, that if you're an officer, you can simply stand by, stand down, stand idle, and not do anything and wait for everybody to be executed, killed, slaughtered, massacred? Is that the message that you sent today?
¿Estás decepcionado con tu
Totalmente
resultado?
decepcionado. I will say this though, the next time that this happens, this is not going to happen. Take LaHood's information down, take Jason's name down, and send them the message. Send them the picture of your child. That officer, that officer does not protect us. Now the message is clear. If you're an officer, you don't have to do anything. You stand back and wait for the Army, for the Marines, everybody to show up. No one takes accountability.
What message does this send ahead of Arredondo's trial that's going to be scheduled eventually?
It's another battle, you faith is fractured, but you never lose faith. You don't lose faith because these children that are no longer with us, that are at the cemetery, they can't speak for themselves. We speak for them. We fight to the end. And as hard as it is, they deserve it. The teachers, Irma, Eva, they had nothing on them except for valor, except for courage, and they fought to the end. They pushed back hard. They gave their life. The teachers, all the survivors, all the testimonies you hear, that you heard, all those poor little survivors that have to live with the nightmare. How do they look at themselves in the mirror tomorrow morning? They wake up and say, not guilty. The man let me down. You can't paint an image and portray him as some kind of hero.
It's just like reliving the pain that you went through.
Absolutely. Time and time again with the school district, with Uvalde PD, with the county. There's a lot of unanswered. Nolasco, where's Nolasco at? Where's that information? Absolutely nothing, right? Quiet, deflecting. Look that way, look this way, look that way. But don't look towards me.
Were you really hopeful for a guilty verdict?
I was very hopeful for a guilty verdict. At stake, what do we have? We have children at stake. Absolutely innocent children that did everything that they were trained to do. Hide, turn the lights off. But the officer that was trained to do exactly, to encounter, to go towards the shooter, to listen for the gunshot, everything, right? And what does he do? Sit back for an hour and change. For a minute and change while the massacre continues to happen.
Do you think other officers need to be charged? It's only 2 so far. Do you still think more officers need to be charged?
Absolutely. It sends a message that and I'm sure there's some good ones out there that are going to check themselves in the mirror tonight and say, do I have the courage to do my job? And so, yeah, absolutely, the answer is yes. You got to look in every direction and say, I'm going to hold them accountable. Because if you don't have it, just don't show up to work tomorrow.
What message do you have for Adrian Gonzales?
Don't be fooled by your attorney. Your attorney can talk about sandwiches, a sandwich of coward, but there's something on the outside and the bread. It's insulting, to be honest with you.
Jesse, ¿podría darnos unas palabras en español, por favor, sobre el resultado de este?
Totalmente decepcionado, y no es un dolor fuerte. Esperábamos una justicia, que lo hallaran culpable el señor, y totalmente fue un respeto al jurado, pero es una injusticia, la mera verdad. Esos niños totalmente inocentes.
¿Qué es lo que espera para el próximo juicio?
Seguimos adelante con la justicia. El camino a la justicia nunca termina. Llegaremos hasta el fin. El mensaje es totalmente esto, que aunque no lo hayan hallado culpable, él es culpable por la opinión del Estado, por ejemplo, del gobierno, es decir, él es culpable, él es un cobarde, él es un animal, él es un monstruo que simplemente lo que hizo él, ese monstruo creció del miedo, que no tuvo el valor de entrar. Ahí se formó otro monstruo. O sea, no solamente el monstruo fue el que tiró el tiro.
So that's Jesse Rizzo right there. He is the uncle of Jackie Casares, who was one of the students who was killed at Robb Elementary, speaking there, who I actually had a chance to visit with him back in October at the opening of Legacy Elementary there in Uvalde. I think you touched on it earlier where you say, even that day when the new school opened was a bittersweet day, but it is kind of like revisiting and reliving all of that and kind of just that wound, if you will. He has since joined the school board in Uvalde there, just trying to help make change, whatever that looks like. But you can see some emotion on him as well as he's speaking with the media there live in Corpus Christi tonight.
Yeah, obviously, one of the family members disappointed with the verdict from the jury tonight, and he had a lot of things to say, but he really pointed to what message does this send. We were talking about that earlier, whether it is the future trial of the former police chief, Pete Arredondo, or other trials of law enforcement, other law enforcement trainings, responses. What kind of message does this send? That is something we are hearing from the family members tonight, questions that they have. And, you heard him say that the kids did what they were trained to do. Turn off the lights, stay quiet.
Right.
The training of Adrian Gonzales, the training of a law enforcement officer in response to an active shooter was a big focus of this trial.
And he had actually led an active shooter response training course 2 months before this shooting in Uvalde. That came up during the trial. I think you also have to think about the jurors tonight, what must be going through their minds as, they were exposed to some just unbelievable, ungodly images and the testimony and the photos they had to see and everything. And again, if you're just now joining us here within the last hour or so, the verdict has come in and the decision has been made unanimously not guilty.
We're going to take a quick break. We are continuing our coverage here on our streaming platforms of this verdict tonight. We'll join you in just a moment. Welcome back to breaking news coverage here on our streaming platforms. An acquittal tonight for a former Uvalde CISD police officer for his response to the Robb Elementary School shooting.
We're going to go to Corpus Christi. Nico LaHood, the defense attorney, is speaking right now.
450 people in it, and everybody raised their hand that they had heard about this case. Now, the extent of what they heard and whether they made up their mind, of course, we're doing that questioning back and forth. We had a questionnaire as well, and so that was a challenging part of this case as well because there was a narrative out there, and frankly, with all due respect, there was a false narrative out there, and so the true monster in this situation was lost, and then it was all directed at Adrian, and so that was an uphill battle from day one in this case.
During voir dire, there was some auditory outbursts. Have you ever had a voir dire hearing where you could, that people had views? What is your sense on that?
Well, I don't think anybody's had a voir dire this way, but it was new for us as well, and we've tried a lot of cases together as prosecutors and defense attorneys, and it was unique. Just the sheer size of the veneer panel was unique, and so that was unique and that was different, but we had to deal with it. We had a plan dealing with it from day one. We had a strategy going into voir dire, to opening statements, to the way we were going to present evidence, and how we felt that we were going to use the government's witnesses to bring out points, and then wrap it up in closing. And then what we decided at the last minute to not call witnesses because you're always trying to figure out where you're at with a jury based off how the evidence is going from the government. So those are game time decisions that we had to make.
Nico, can you just talk about your strategy here? I was very intrigued because I've been wondering if you thought maybe at some point you went too hard or you were over defending. Maybe that's not the best word. But
no, you can ask it that way. Yeah. And I asked the jury that specifically, and they said no. They thought it was appropriate. You're talking about Ranger Hill?
Yeah, or just even in your closing, or in your closing argument, you were kind of almost apologizing.
To whom?
To the jury or something, if I went too hard. Or
I was referencing Ranger Hill.
Okay.
I was right because you never know, and obviously I didn't take that tone with every witness. The jury said that it was appropriate based off, and that's how I felt it was, and that's why I did it. And because I did. I think about that often. We all do when we're cross-examining witnesses. Obviously, we don't start out that way, but we have to respond appropriately based off the witness, and we prepare them in voir dire. By the way.
Is there anything else you could share with us about what the jury told you about?
Just about the gaps. They talked about gaps. They talked about perspective, what the government didn't prove on Adrian, and then they saw what he did do, and based off what officers, they were very attentive, and they listened, obviously, very directly, and and it seemed like they were catching our theme develop as the trial went on. We didn't have a lot of time with it. We let the government speak first. Christina wanted to talk to them and really get into it, and I knew that it was very personal to her because of the community. So we kind of yielded our time to her with them, and then the judge called us out.
I have a question, if you don't mind. How does Mr. Gonzales feel with this verdict? How does this...
Is there anything you can say? Can we hear from him if possible?
First things first, I want to start by thanking God for this. My family, my wife, and these guys are here. He put them in my path, you know, and I'm just thankful for that. And thank you for the jury for considering all the evidence and making that verdict.
Is there anything you want to say to the families?
No, not right now.
Would you like to say anything about what this entire ordeal has been like for you?
As lawyers?
Well,
for Mr. Gonzales.
Talking to Adrian right now, obviously it's very emotional. So, but I can tell you, I think any one of you can imagine that everybody who's been here, sorry, get me in the mic, that everybody who's sitting in front of us right now, I mean, y'all can't see, I mean, the people that are watching, you can't see it, but I can see just a wall of people in front of me, and that wall of people has been reporting on Uvalde, and not necessarily unfairly, but it has been reporting ever since Adrian was charged that he failed to do his duty, because that's what the prosecutors charged, and that he failed in some way to try to do everything he could to help these children. And the evidence showed that that wasn't true. And the evidence showed that not only did he not fail, but he put himself in great danger. So you can imagine how somebody who has had the entire country look at him as somebody who was not willing to do his duty, and he is a proud man who does do his duty, and he went in there when it was time for him to go. He went in there, he was one of the first 5 in, and going down a hall where a rifleman, a gunman with a rifle, could have easily ended his life, could have easily made his wife a widow, and he was willing to do it because he did want to protect those children. So he went through all of that, and so the feeling that he's communicated, and that he'll be able to communicate, I think, in the future, is that it was obviously extremely difficult. It was difficult for the community, difficult for his family, difficult for him.
Nico and Adrian, you guys shared a pretty powerful hug right after that verdict. Just walk me through the emotions in that moment.
I mean, it's overwhelming for him. For us as well, we take on the burdens of our clients. We take it very personally. For me, I believe it's about stewardship. When a client comes to us as a firm and says, "I trust you with my life," I mean, it's not. I take that very serious. I don't sleep. I'm a prayerful man. I pray for wisdom in how to handle and how to conduct ourselves in trial and to think. And for us, we got to make sure that nobody's going to outwork us. And so, for us, it was kind of a culmination of his trust in us and our hard work together. And we didn't do it alone. These 2 lawyers are amazing. I learn from them every day. But then we have Michelle and Joseph as well, and then the team back at the office. So it was bittersweet. Bitter because we know that there's people that are sad over this verdict. And as someone who's gone through the loss of my brother, who was murdered in my driveway, and I know what it did to my parents, and so I felt for the family. So I thought of the family. I was hugging him, for us, and for the family members, to be honest with you.
Mr. LaHood, you've been the DA. You've been on the other side. You also brought up Randy Hill. Do you think, and can others be charged in this?
Well, I'm not going to make a charging decision for Christina. She's the elected DA. She has to answer to her voters. But
I get that, but
yeah.
I mean, you brought him up to the jury in closing. Do you think there's other people that share culpability?
I'll reserve my judgment on that, my comment on that.
So why do you think they haven't charged anybody else? I mean, it went from DPS all the way down, and they ended up with Adrian and Pete Arredondo.
I'm not going to speak for Chief Arredondo. I think for Adrian, it's what we said in closing. He was the lowest man on the totem pole, and I think they thought he was easier pickings. I mean, I'm not speaking to Christina's intention. I mean, I'm not saying it was, immoral or anything like that or unethical. But, I mean, I just thought they probably thought he was the easiest one to charge, in my opinion.
I want to ask you, very few of us have seen everything in this. You've had access to everything. Is there something that the country can learn, law enforcement can learn from this, based on your experience, based on what you see here? Because this is going to happen again, sadly, in this country.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, this is a synergistic effect. When I said in closing that if that school door would have been locked, if those classroom doors would have been locked, if they had cameras on the outside of the schools, if we had officers that to Jason's point, had clarity in their training and then had the resources of what to do, if there was officers assigned to schools with the right equipment, with a long rifle, with handguns. I know it looks bad for people, but this looks even worse, and it feels worse for those precious families. I mean, so what is it going to cost us to protect our treasure, which is our children? We should say there's no cost. Money should be no object. And so if you want to make difference, you have to bring everyone together, training in shoot houses, meaning actively train in realistic scenarios so these officers will, as they say, fight like they train. You have to train. You can't just do PowerPoints and think that someone has information that's going to sink in. This is muscle memory as it came up during trial. So this is a longer conversation that I'm happy to have because we've seen situations like this before, but it's a synergistic effect of many of the things that I just mentioned.
Adrian, what does moving on look like to you?
Just picking up the pieces and moving forward. That's it.
Adrian, do you speak Spanish? Como una para ver how do you feel in Spanish?
No, it's,
The prosecution made it clear that they wanted this case to be a message for other law enforcement officers who find themselves in a similar position in the future. Do you believe that this case could be used as precedent for other cases?
I hope not. I hope other prosecutors don't see this case and think that they can go forward with these specific facts, with the law that they used as a case of first impression, with the training that the officers did or didn't have, with the resources that were not provided for them, with the school district that unfortunately did not provide the best situation for those children. I hope this is not the example moving forward, and I don't think it will be, but I can't make that decision for them.
Mr. Hood, the families are distraught, in tears. Your message to them?
I'll continue to pray for them. I mean, I can't. To say that I understand, I've experienced that with my own family and with my brother's passing, but I mean, it's a genuine hurt for them. It was bittersweet. There's no winners in this situation because they're still mourning, and I understand that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, there were reaction from Adrian Gonzales' defense team led by defense attorney Nico LaHood, and you heard him say there a couple of times that the verdict tonight is bittersweet. It is one that they were hoping for as his defense team, but Nico LaHood really pointing to the loss and the grief that these families are feeling once again, having relived all of this over the last 2 weeks during this trial.
And for the first time, we heard from Adrian Gonzales, who did not testify in this trial at all in his own defense, thanking God first and acknowledging his defense team, who, as he said, was put in his path, and was asked if he had anything to say to the families in that immediate moment, and he declined to say anything. And so just a lot unfolding here in the last half hour or so.
A lot of questions, as we have brought up here, about what will this mean for the trial of Pete Arredondo? What will this mean for law enforcement training for future trials that could happen? And, you know, Nico LaHood and his team there not weighing in on what they think the implications could be in regard to that. But again, just talking about this is the outcome that they had hoped for. And we were talking about the differences in the time of presenting the cases, the prosecution versus the defense. The defense called two witnesses over 30 that the prosecution called. Much of this trial was spent on the prosecution presenting its case. So it seems like the jury heard something you would think in the cross-examination from Nico and his team, from Jason Goss, that led them ultimately to this verdict.
Yeah, because the prosecution took 9 days and the defense a day, 2 tops, because this was day 11 of the trial. And ultimately, again, we mentioned it had to be a unanimous verdict. And in about an hour ago or so, we got word that the verdict had come in. And of course, we are hearing from family members, Robb family members in Uvalde. Our Avery Everett is there. So we're going to step aside from our coverage now, come right back at 10 o'clock on KSAT 12 and have everything covered for you from Corpus Christi and, of course, from Uvalde.
We'll see you then.